Good afternoon, everyone. Um, m- my name is Saumer Phukan. I represent Intel. I have been with Intel for a few years. Currently, I run the customer and partner engineering team for Intel. As my name suggests, when I was listening to Mr. Behra in the panel discussion, and he talked about his experience as a kid with or trains in Puri, the part of the India where I come from, the railways has been a lifeline. I mean, the remote, like I come from Assam, so the transportation of foods, any kind of goods, any kind of personnel for security is heavily dependent on railways. So having that, being an ability to come here and hopefully play a role to make a transformation to where Intel can support railways to make its next journey, I think is a privilege, both from an Intel perspective as well as a personal perspective. So happy to be here, and hopefully over the next 20 minutes, I'm looking to cover primarily three things, given it's a 20-minute discussion. Um, Again, I'm referring back to Mr. Behra since he was here. He talked about how the conversation should be orchestrated around a citizen, right? It's not about the technology. I mean, everybody can talk about technology. We do technologies across the world. It's about what we see as a citizen and how we drive technologies to help a citizen get the best of what we offer. So if I can leave that message with the team as I go through or the audience here to the discussion, that would be one. Second, the second thing I wanted to touch upon would be it's easy to talk about problems. It's the bigger challenge is the how, right? And we as Intel, we believe that the kind of the interdependence of physical infrastructure and digital infrastructure has become increasingly important to drive the right services for the citizen. So I'll briefly touch upon the technologies or our approach that we have had, that be number two, and I'll close about talking about specific to the railways, the transportation, and what probably we are doing, and hopefully I address some of the questions that you have. Me and my team will be around for the rest of the day as well. So although 20 minutes may not cover all the questions, we'll sit with you and happy to discuss going forward. So talking about the challenges or a human-centric approach, what's kind of unique is whether it's a pandemic defined or just a question of the availability of technology or just a question that the discussions are moving the discussions are moving forward. The four key challenges that um, the world as a whole is facing, and so is India. It's not new to, there's something unique for India. We all talk about climate and pollution change, right? We all talk about the public health and safety, right? We talk about the mental health and physical health of people, and we all talk about traffic congestion. Now, this is a set of survey by what we talk about across urban city leaders like Mr. Behra from global perspective. 94% of the people have identified that pollution, the climate change and pollution is one of the big issues. For today's discussion, I'll limit on the right-hand side saying 50% globally, and not surprised to us, I come from Bangalore. There's one side of Bangalore which has the metro, and the other side of Bangalore which still is implementing the metro. And depending on where you are, there's a huge difference of the commute time that you take from going from one place to another. So traffic congestion is something that probably all of us live and breathe with as we go forward, and that's a key issue that we are facing. But coming back, as I started off saying, none of these are in isolation. Traffic congestion has a relationship to pollution and climate change, and within traffic congestion, there is a dependence also in safety, right? Or in physical, public and mental health. So these are all interdependent issues that we need to think about. But as I go through, there are four key themes that we think as we talk about governments providing the best to its citizens or best to the businesses that are operating here, the four things we have to think about. One is pollution and climate change. One is the whole public safety. One is the health. And fourth is the traffic congestion, which I think we as a team, we should be able to address as we go forward. Okay, and that would define how citizens see us, how business sees us, and how they're going to look at us as a country compared to some of the other countries in the world. Okay, now moving forward from here, if you look at the set of problems that we talked about, right, traffic congestion to public pollution and change, what have you, we at Intel, as I started off saying, we believe the three key vectors kind of we think about that are interplaying here. One, given the size and scale of the problem, inaction is not an option. I think Mr. Behra touched upon it as well, saying you can't sit and say just because we had this unfortunate incident in Balasore, we move backwards now. No, inaction is not an option. Okay, but I think the bigger thing about this to think about is the other two things, which is about saying when you want to take action, most successes have been seen if you have the physical infrastructure overlaid with the right digital infrastructure. I don't know what. Am I good on the screen or? I mean, tells. So, as I said, the first thing, as I said, is about the lack of action. Inaction is not an option. But if you want to take action, there are two fundamental drivers that have driven success globally. One, the overlay of the digital infrastructure and the physical infrastructure. When we look at the digital infrastructure, we believe in this world there are five kind of elements which are interdependent and playing, and we talk about them as the five superpowers. None of this should be a surprise to anyone because it got talked in the panels. We touch upon a thing about computation and need for computation. Computation is everywhere. It's beginning to start to come into your watch and your health devices that you wear, right? So computation. Second is the connectivity, and it's great to see India lead with even 6G now, saying we are going to be 6G ready. So pervasive connectivity and availability of connectivity is what's making a lot of this possible. Number two. Number three, it talks about the whole edge to cloud. I think multiple panelists talked about how we really need to bring together the disparate data sets. How do you bring this together as one available data layer to be able to help us to make the right decision top of it, right? We talked about data the third. The whole conference is about sensing. So I wanted to, I don't think I need to convince anyone here about the importance of sensing and getting the data. But last but not least is artificial intelligence or intelligence. And I think Professor Vyas touched upon it in detail about why intelligence is important. So if we talk about these five superpowers in various ways, right? Computation, connectivity, intelligence, edge to cloud, and sensing. The beauty of this is these are ubiquitous. In the sense, the more and more information it gathers, then more and more helpful it becomes, right? So, I think he was very, Professor Vyas was very passionate when he talked about, I don't know what is the data inside Kavach, right? I don't know what the data that we have that the industry doesn't want to share with us because the data is the key. So having that kind of conversation with respect to saying, how do I make this more powerful? Getting the data, processing the data, driving more computation, how do I make it ubiquitous? They're interdependent and running on each other. Number one, right? So we should have that conversation in mind that when you're looking at these five pillars or five superpowers we talk about, A, they're interdependent, and B, the more interdependent and more you leverage, the lower becomes the cost. Okay? A lot of time, I think people talk about, hey, we have this budget. But if you use the technology and you're able to get the data and you're able to leverage it, it decreases the cost of adoption and it increases the accuracy of adoption. So as you go down this path of technology solutions and the superpowers, these are the big levers. Leverage it, adopt it, use it, share it. Because you want to be more and more cost efficient, you want to be more and more accurate. Right? So keep that conversation in mind. Second, I talked about 3 points. I talked about lack of inaction is not supportable. I talked about the 5 superpowers that needs to be put into play on physical and digital. Last but not the least, the solution to the future lies in the solutions of today. You have to do human-centric solutions on this. You just can talk about artificial intelligence and move on. That doesn't work. What does artificial intelligence can do for us in the context of citizens in India traveling by rails? It could be as simple as ticketing. It could be as critical as security inside the train coach on a speed, flying at a particular speed, at a particular time of the night, in a particular dangerous location. So think about this in 3 points. The 5 superpowers, how they interplay with each other, how if we interplay and we use it more, the cost goes down, the efficiency goes up. And that's how you're using this solution, how are you using these technologies to define solutions that we talked about from a human-centric approach. As Intel, given the time, I've kind of put together a few examples that I think are relevant from an India perspective. Let me pull this out here. I start from the security piece. In Korea, using video-based algorithms, right? And intelligent cameras, we were able to increase the criminal activities by 37.4%. Specific data, this is any interest, happy to share that. Emissions, and in terms of efficiency saving, when I talk about $1 of investment in this technology has given $5 of saving. Are we interested? Is it relevant to India? That's the first conversation. We should bring that, but if it is relevant, we as Intel, working with our partner ecosystem, it's not an independent play, have a solution that can make it work. And last but not least, we're talking about traffic reduction. Being in Bangalore, I live it, as I said, very regularly on my challenges with traffic. But if you do the right algorithm, with the right amount of data, with right traffic management, there are cases out there we have reduced it by close to 40%. And this is not a question of just leaving it to road traffic. For countries like Taiwan, where I had the privilege of spending some time, the amount of intelligence they have built into how they commute, using the taxi system to the bus system to the metro system to the high-speed system, the amount of intelligence and amount of data that I have built in and their ability to use this interplay is significantly different versus where we are right now. And that's where probably we need to be. So again, just want to highlight the conversation. There are enough examples out there where the investments being made had given significant returns. In some cases 5x, in some cases close to 40% improvement in the benefits being given back to the citizens and the businesses. We should think about in three terms. A, inaction is, as Mr. Behra said, inaction is not a discussion. If you are moving into action, we start thinking about saying, okay, how do I interplay with these superpowers? Stay invested, because if we stay invested, the conversation will decrease the cost and increase the accuracy. Losing it midway is also not an option. Okay? The last thing I want to touch upon this slide, a lot of times we get very enamored by the early cost. Like, hey, this, if I want to implement this solution today, this is X crore rupees or X lakh rupees or whatever it is, right? But the cost, when you amortize over time, there are multiple business models to address this cost. So we would request that as the ecosystem or as the private-private partnership we talk about, we want to work together, there's an option for us to work to say, what is a solution we can do the best for the citizens of the country or Ministry of Railways or Railways as an offering? What are the services we can offer? How do we make sure we generate a win-win conversation across the industry, across the partners, across what have you to make this happen? Okay? We are not alone. As we move forward, as I talked about the problems, I talked about how we are going to approach this. Increasingly, you will expect citizens, with the increase of usage of technology, citizens are expecting, the expectation from citizens are going up, whether it is in terms of the speed of response that they're looking for, whether it is in terms of the security of the data they are looking for, or the sovereignty of what they want to do. And we are not alone. It basically means a lot of computation, or all of these capabilities will move to the edge. And that's where the future is. We're talking about the reduction of latency. We're talking about the better security. We're talking about the better, wider reach and scalability if you are able to do it at the edge. The wider reach and greater scalability, and the world and the industry, we expect that 2025, there's a $270 billion saving, which essentially shows to us that the industry is adopting edge as a solution. So what we really need to think about is coming back here is as a railways as an organization, working with its ecosystem, what is relevant for us from an edge computing perspective, where we can bring in the pillars about computation, intelligence, connectivity, what have you, and provide the best for citizens. So keep that conversation in mind as we go through. I just want to touch upon railways in terms of specific to railways, what we want to talk about, right? And if you really look at this conversation, I'm going from the left to right, all these are equally important, but there are different requirements from a railways or citizens perspective on latency, security, the computational need or the intelligence need, depending on which system you're talking about. So there are more, I would say, more transactional, non-real-time systems like ticketing or passenger entry or station management, probably marginally less, right? But when you go into a coach, the requirement for latency, reduction of latency or more increase of security goes up when you go inside that van, right? When you go inside a coach, it goes up. What we have to introduce, we have technology and solutions for each of the elements mentioned out there. I'll specifically mention about because this incidents came out. And by the way, the Balasore incident is not the only one. We had a similar incident in China about 12 months ago. Front object detection is a key piece of this discussion. So Intel has talked about solutions working with partners where you have a camera and lidar on the front. There's an in-coach computational capability that you have, and we manage it through an internal monitoring system of sensors. So you can actually make real-time decisions based on the information gathered and the intelligence available at the edge, at the train area, to make sure what you can do to either move it on a different track or you stop it or what kind of corrections you need to do that. Those solutions, depending on the appetite, depending on the issue, they exist on what Intel can offer and what not only Intel can offer through its partners. So again, from a Railways perspective, we should segregate this conversation of where we need to focus on, whether it is on the real end, highest end, lowest latency real-time applications, or the transactional system, or something in between. And each of them will lead to a solution that we want to talk about. I'll close by talking about, this is not about Intel. We work with a set of partners. We saw Cisco out here. We talked about Wipro and Dell, some of the SIs that we work with. IBM, Kyndryl are equivalent partners as well. So we work very closely with the entire partner ecosystem to go and make this happen in terms of implementing for the various railways or various transportation challenges across the world. And for us, it's a privilege again to come back and work with you to see what we could do. Our request will be just threefold, right? We should just forget about what technology is out there. There'll always be newer technologies. To me, there are three challenges that I see personally that I think we as Indian Railways and the ecosystem in India can think about. A, we talked about artificial intelligence. What do we do from an AI perspective to make the decisions faster, less costly, more accurate at what is relevant and we can afford? I think having real-time AI or ability to do that nearest to the train coach or nearest to the station is something that I think is a problem we could all work together and address, number one. The second problem that we talked about, I think is, in my view, after hearing the panels today is, which we definitely can work together, is the centralization of this fragmentation of data. Because if you want to do this intelligence, the first problem I talked about, you really need to be able to pull the data together. And it needs a kind of virtual, centralized one view of the data to look at and say, how do you take this and make your best decision closest to where it needs to be at a cost point? That is the second problem we'll be happy to work with you on, and I think. Last but not least, only Mr. Kapoor from the EL services, he touched upon it. The position is skilling, right? When you're talking about this massive change or massive transformation you really want to go about, you need, and the technologies are moving very fast. You can't just assume that today I have come and talked to you about, edge computing, and we are very smart on edge computing. Let's assume in 12 months, and 12 months down the line, we are great. 12 months down the line, more technology is talked about. And even Mr. Kumar in his address talked about how the definition of smart is always changing, right? So where we need to think about is technology can help with scaling too. We are talking about this conversation of generative AI, right? Generative AI, depending on where you want to be, potentially could give you answers of where you can get your workforce skill with the technologies that you have or about the technologies that you have. So if there's an interest around skilling, given the large workforce railways have, there's probably an opportunity for us to work to go through the, as I said, AI for business, creating an edge to cloud infrastructure, but also skilling of what the workforce needs to have to make sure that technology is effectively used to drive the business for Ministry of Railways. With this, again, it's a privilege to be here. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to interact more for the rest of the day and see where we want to go from here. Thanks so much.